All right, today we're going to walk through the heartbreaking story of Air India Flight 171. This is more than just an explainer about a crash. It's a look at a devastating loss, a really complex investigation, and a fight for answers that goes way beyond just one single flight. Before we get into any of the technical details or the legal side of things, I want you to just look at this number. 260. That's the total number of people who lost their lives. It's a staggering figure, and it's the human cost at the absolute center of the story. So here's what happened. On June 12, 2025, Air India Flight 171, a modern Boeing 787 Dreamliner, was taking off from Ahmedabad, India. It was headed for London. But just seconds after lifting off the runway, it crashed. It never even made it past the airport perimeter. Okay, so Section 1, seconds after takeoff. Let's start by trying to piece together what happened in those final tragic moments of the flight. You know, the timeline here is just chillingly short. The flight starts off completely normal, taking off for London. But seconds, literally seconds into the climb, something goes catastrophically wrong. The aircraft loses all thrust and just falls out of the sky. The scene of the crash was devastating, not just for those on the plane, but for people on the ground as well. And here you can see the scale of that devastation. It's just immense. You had 241 fatalities on the plane itself. Miraculously, and it really is a miracle, there was one single survivor from the aircraft. But the tragedy didn't end there. The crash also took 19 lives on the ground and injured another 67 people. Section 2, the critical clue. So once the immediate horror of the crash was clear, the focus shifted to one single urgent question. Why? And this is where investigators found themselves staring at a really baffling technical mystery. This was the question. The one that was at the heart of the entire investigation. I mean, think about it. Modern jets like the 787 are built with so many layers of redundancy. For both engines to just quit at the exact same time, that's almost unthinkable. It's not supposed to be possible. So what on earth could have happened? The very first breakthrough, that critical clue, came from the cockpit voice recorder. In the middle of all the chaos of those final moments, you hear one of the pilots ask this desperate question, asking why the fuel had been cut off. This single phrase pointed investigators right toward the source of the problem. Now, to understand that question, you got to know about these things. The engine fuel control switches. They're pretty straightforward. Run is the normal spot. It lets fuel flow to the engines. Cutoff is the emergency position that stops the fuel flow instantly. Moving those switches to cut off in the middle of a flight is basically a death sentence for the engines. And this is where things get really mysterious. Because the physical evidence from the wreckage showed both of those switches were in the cutoff position. But the cockpit recording told a totally different story. You hear one pilot asking why the fuel is cut, and the other pilot says he didn't do it. They sound confused. That contradiction was huge. It suggested this wasn't pilot error, but something much more sinister, like a bizarre mechanical or automated fault. And that brings us to this key piece of technology, the ram air turbine, or the RAT. The easiest way to think of it is as a small emergency windmill. It's designed to pop out of the plane's body to generate just enough power for essential controls, if and only if the plane loses power from both engines. Now, the timing of when that RAT deployed, well, that turned out to be the smoking gun. Data analysis proved the RAT deployed before the fuel was cut. This changes everything. It means the plane suffered a total, uncommanded power failure first. The fuel cutoff wasn't the cause of the disaster. It happened after the plane was already in deep trouble. Suddenly, this wasn't about pilot error. It was about a catastrophic failure of the system itself. So, Section 3, a fight for answers. While all the investigators were focused on that technical puzzle, the families of the 260 victims were starting their own incredibly painful journey. It was a fight for answers and a fight for dignity. I mean, you can only imagine their ordeal. They were pushing hard for transparency, demanding that the black box data be released. And then their pain was just compounded by these horrific reports that some of the victims' remains had been misidentified and sent to the wrong families in the UK. So they weren't just grieving. They were having to fight for the most basic respect and truth. This number, 65, represents a huge turning point in the family's fight for justice. And here's why. The well-known U.S. law firm, Beasley Allen, started representing at least 65 of the families. This was a massive shift. Their search for answers was now a powerful, coordinated legal battle for accountability, and it was aimed squarely at a potential manufacturing or design flaw in the aircraft. And this brings us to Section 4, the search for accountability. Because this legal push took the focus of the tragedy and broadened it way out, from just a single airline to the entire aviation industry. So one of the first major legal moves was a petition filed in India's Supreme Court. It demanded a complete safety audit of Air India. But the court actually ended up rejecting that petition. And the court's reason for rejecting it really came down to this one pivotal question that they asked. Why just Air India? They weren't dismissing the problem, not at all. They were questioning whether the petitioners had the right target. You see, the court's logic was that if a huge systemic flaw caused this tragedy, then singling out just one airline doesn't fix the root problem. They argued that any really meaningful safety review had to be applied across the whole industry. It was a moment that really shifted the conversation from just assigning blame to preventing it from ever happening again. And that really leaves us with this final crucial question. The story of Flight 171 shows this very fine, very complex line between the search for answers, finding out what happened, and the quest for accountability, deciding who is responsible. It's a question that the families, the investigators, and the entire aviation industry are still grappling with to this day.